Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Andana. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Mandana, and today we have a very special guest, Erik, who goes by Not Dr. Soby on TikTok, and who makes content regarding medical school applications in Canada. Welcome, Erik. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. Actually, I recently changed my name on TikTok today.
Really? Oh, no.
Yeah, it's Pre-Med Daddy. There's a reason for it, but I can explain it a little bit later, too. But yeah, now it's Pre-Med Daddy.
Okay, perfect.
That's cool. So hi, Erik, and welcome to our podcast. First off, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started making videos on TikTok.
Okay, so I'm a Canadian pre-med. This is my third year applying, and in the process, I've been sharing a lot of my journey when it comes to writing the MCAT, taking the CASPER assessment, and the experiences that I've accrued in my day-to-day work. But outside of that, the reason I actually got into TikTok was through rapping and music. I was originally a rapper. I put a lot of time into that, and it wasn't really working out. Like, the music was great, but the money wasn't coming in, so I had to kind of change gears and then change my focus. And just by chance, I actually made a video on my MCAT results, the fact that I did well on most sections, but the car section, and that video resonated well with people, and then they started asking me for kind of tips on how to do good on the sections that I did well in, and tips on how to not do poorly like I did on cars. And then from that, I really used my experience with teaching, I think, to further grow my platform on TikTok.
Awesome. That's so interesting. I had no idea that's how you started on TikTok. Last I checked, you gained quite a bit of following, 7,000 followers on TikTok and over 110,000 likes. And I was wondering, has your experience on TikTok influenced your perspective on the medical field or changed your journey through your application process?
Okay, it's definitely had a large influence on me. In terms of my view of the medical field, I'm aware that the people that I see on TikTok are not a representation of all doctors, so I think I might be a little bit skewed in that regard. But what I can say from what I see, and again, it's what pops up on my feed, I see a lot of lifestyle doctors, and I get the need for balance, but I do really appreciate coming across doctors that are more in line with what it means to be a doctor, not just as a job, but as a career and as something that you really love to do. And having said that, some creators that come to mind that I really enjoy, I had to write them down because I don't always remember their names, but one is Kate's MD. So she's a new med student, and I really like just the content that she makes regarding medicine and learning and giving tips to people to help with the application process. I think it's great. Two other ones, there's this guy, his name's RJ Adapted. He's a medical student in a wheelchair, and he kind of talks about his struggles with it, and it's really cool. I absolutely love it. And I don't watch him all the time, but when I see his videos come up, I'm like, oh, that's actually really, really fascinating to see. And it does speak volumes and relates to a lot of the experiences I've seen with general patients that have problems with mobility. And in my work with hoarding, you see it all the time. People really struggle with just moving from the home to transportation to anywhere else. It doesn't matter what it is. They have their difficulties. So I really like that guy as well. And then the last one, I think my favorite one, he's a psychiatrist in the States. His name's Pressrow. And he really talks about his day-to-day as a practicing physician. So those are the people that I really gravitate towards. But again, most of the people I see on TikTok, I'm not as much of a fan of the just lifestyle balance. I get it. But again, I think I'm really in it for the medicine and the life of being a doctor. So that's that. I think I addressed it for the most part. Oh, and how it's influenced my journey in medicine. It's influenced it tremendously. I've gotten so many opportunities from teaching and interviewing, like the interview I'm having right now. It's been tremendous. And I think the biggest influence was probably when I started teaching with Pre-Medly. So if you don't know Pre-Medly, it's a big organization in the States that helps with prep for the MCAT, but also helps students with their applications for both the States and Canada. And it's been great working with the two owners of that company, Lauren and Evan Botterman, lovely company. So that was one opportunity I got. And then also with the interview that I had on Casper, which is the one you saw, Mandana, a lot of other people in my workplaces noticed. They're like, oh, Erik, we saw you on the news. We didn't know you were like that. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's just something. So from that, a lot of conversation kind of came about me being a teacher or tutor. And I got a lot of inquiries for that as well. And just kind of opportunities coming at my door randomly. Like another example, for the first time last year, I was able to do interview prep, which was like a big accomplishment for me. But being able to work with like other pre-meds that were kind of further along in their journey, I guess, and their experiences, they were all able to give me some insights, and also brought me on board for some of the research that they're doing in their own schools, which has been really, really fascinating to become a part of. Because outside of academics, if you're not in a school setting or in like medicine, it's really hard to get research. It's really, really hard. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have gotten those opportunities. Yeah.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
And as you might have seen, Queen's Medical School has implemented a lottery system for its interview invites, such that everyone over a certain GPA, MCAT, Casper score is then put into a lottery, and the people picked are then invited for an interview. And I was wondering, what do you think of this system? Do you think it's an equitable way to go about medical school admissions?
Okay, so I think the system is unique, definitely, because no other schools, to my knowledge, are really doing that. I'm going to kind of address the question a little bit differently. First of all, there's a question of, is it equitable in the context of medical admissions? Maybe, sure. But when it comes to applying to medicine and trying to get into it, it's not just about the MCAT and Casper and whatever else they were looking at as well, the GPA as well. It's also about the things you give up in trying to get a good MCAT score, in trying to get a good GPA. So when you throw everybody into a lottery, sure, you're maybe eliminating differences that come down to not being able to, put in money for MCAT preparation, but you're also hurting the people that took that sacrifice, that said, you know what, despite me being in a financially poor position, I'm going to go out on a limb, I'm going to sacrifice the other volunteering opportunities that I could have had otherwise, and I'm going to, again, put all my eggs in one basket. So in that regard, I don't think it's the most equitable approach. And also, not everybody can have the ability to apply year after year, because if you're just applying year after year, waiting for a lottery, some people will be able to stick to it because they have the funds to do so. Others, they can't, right? They just have to move on with their life. Luckily, I'm in a position where I can continue. Maybe it's because I'm just very, persistent with medicine. I'm definitely by no means rich, but I'm not willing to give up because I have found a lot of meaning in this kind of process. So that's what I'll say with that. So yeah, again, in summary, I don't think it's the most equitable approach at all. So yeah, if anything, I think to accommodate for that, maybe they could give a little bit of a weighting. So for example, and it's hard to weight because then it's a question of who weights what. But let's say for GPA, if you have within a 3.8 to 4.0, you get like 2 lottery tickets. Whereas if you have like 3.2 to 3.8, then it's 1. And if you have below, then that is 0. And just keep on going from there. But again, I wouldn't say it's the most equitable approach.
Interesting. That's a really unique perspective. I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you for sharing your opinion on that. And so as you mentioned, you were on the news and you discussed the Casper test and how it might not necessarily be a good tool to use for medical school admissions. Could you tell us a bit more about the Casper test, what it is, its pros and cons?
Yeah, of course. So the Casper test, it's a situational judgment test, and it assesses the test takers on multiple competencies like empathy, collaboration, communication, teamwork, a whole bunch of things that you theoretically want in a physician. And in principle, it's a great idea. Of course, you want to find applicants that are able to demonstrate these qualities, right? But one of the issues that comes up, first of all, is the process itself of trying to find people that are empathetic. Like once you put a benchmark up of what it means to be an empathetic person, you introduce the possibility for actually taking in people that are not the type of people you want in the positions of being a doctor. And it's kind of it's a drawback of any screening, but I'll give you an example in my own life of how I've seen this playing out. So in my life, I kind of am in a roommate situation, and I'm actively having people live with me, and I have to choose the roommates. And often people ask me, oh, how do you select your roommates? And at first I'd say, well, I'd go through this lengthy process of looking at like their resume basically and kind of screening and making calls on their behalf and trying to figure it all out and giving them some interview questions. Now, the person that I thought would have been the very best person to live with, very well spoken, very empathetic, very well presenting, turned out to be the absolute worst. So it's like just evil in a sense. So if Casper is finding good physicians, that's fair. But how many like evil physicians are they also taking in? I don't know. That's something to consider at least. So in principle, again, Casper is good. Process maybe not the best. And I'll speak on the process aspect now. So from my knowledge, when I was doing a little bit of side research looking into McMaster and how they validated the study, essentially what happened is they had a group of students within their school, McMaster, and they administered this test, this Casper, when it was being developed. And then they said, okay, we're going to see how well this test predicts performance in future medical students. Okay, so they give these students the test, and then a few years down the line, they say, oh, was this test good at assessing these students' performance? And they said, yeah, for the most part, yes. Now, with McMaster, if you're aware, they already have very good candidates, like very good students coming in. So if you're assessing these students using Casper and then saying, oh, they're going to become good doctors because Casper says so, it's like, well, what if you used other students that were just not affiliated with McMaster? Would you have found the same results? And eventually, I'm sure they branched out from McMaster, but even starting just with McMaster students themselves, maybe there should have been a little bit more consideration of generalization to start with. And then also from that point, the evaluators were physicians and medical professionals. And to my understanding, more recently, the way that they're actually assessing Casper is they're using basically random people that are just trained to assess on these Casper competencies. So whereas it was validated with physicians, now it's being implemented by non-physicians. And that is not good in terms of the validity of the study and the validity of the actual results that are being purported to uphold what it means to be a good physician. So overall, Casper, good idea. In process, maybe not the best. And actually, yesterday I wrote this test, again for the third time, and I had a technical difficulty for maybe 30, 45 minutes, and the same thing was a problem for everybody taking the test. So imagine the stress that these students would feel, thinking that a lot of their applications might just be voided because they're unaware that it's actually a systemic or like a system-wide problem. And eventually they shared the message, but still, like, in the moment, it was hard. And now they're trying to rectify the issue. They're saying the people that wrote it, you can keep that score if you want. The people that weren't able to complete it, you can write it on another day. But then the question becomes, how are you going to be then grading people if it's relative to everybody else? And this is the last thing I'm going to bring up. What if everybody that you're testing for empathy is already empathetic enough? Like, are you going to screen somebody out because they're not more empathetic than another? And the last thing I'll say about this is this. Empathy is great in terms of serving other people, but just as with everything else, like there can be too much of a good that makes it bad. So yes, you want empathy. Yes, you want to be able to relate to the patient. Yes, you want to consider their values, but you should also be able to stand up for, no, this is kind of the rules and regulations. And maybe Casper does a good job in finding that balance. But when I think about Casper, I think of it primarily, and maybe I'm biased, I think of it as assessing like being a nice person, right? But sometimes it's not always the best approach, I'd say. Anyways, that's my take on Casper. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your perspective. I definitely think Casper has its big limitations, and you've named a few of them, but yes, then the question becomes, how do we replace it, but...
I can quickly chime in. Yeah. Not necessarily a replacement, but already all the schools have an interview process where you can talk one-on-one with people, and they ask questions of the type like, describe a time you had conflict and how you mediated the conflict. And you can just talk one-on-one with the person. Why do you also need Casper? Like, maybe it's just used to help filter people out because it's a competitive process. But yeah.
Yeah. And as two Francophone students, we never had to do the MCAT. So I'm sure you've probably heard of that. But I was wondering if you could briefly talk about it. And do you have any tips for people who might be thinking of taking it?
For sure. So the MCAT is the test you usually have to take before getting into medicine. There are some exceptions, but I guess the schools that you guys are attending as well. But on the MCAT, they test with 4 key sections. One is like biology, biochemistry. Another is physics. Another is like cars, and another is psychology, sociology. So there's the 4 sections. And really, what I'd say is if you're trying to prepare for medicine, to keep your options open. And it depends on the region that you're into, but for the most part, to keep your options open, you want to start studying for that essentially in high school. And I don't mean like actively saying like, oh, I'm going to search up the MCAT exact type questions, but all the concepts that are being tested are already being taught in like grade 10. Like grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. So grade 10 chemistry, just naming, for instance. If you want to name compounds, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 questions on the MCAT that asks you that. Same thing for physics, same thing for math. Like mental math, you should be able to do in grade 10, working with fractions. If you can't work with fractions on the MCAT, it's going to make it a lot harder on you for the physics section. So to prepare for the MCAT, just take all your courses seriously and just continue learning and really optimize your approach to learning so that when the MCAT does come, if you do need to take it, you're ready for it. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that regarding the MCAT. It's very interesting because we never had to do that test. And I was wondering, do you have any memorable interactions or stories from people in your audience that have particularly resonated with you and influenced your content?
I've definitely yes, like there's been a general interaction of somebody reaches out, they're saying they're having a difficulty with like idea X on their application. Like maybe it's their GPA, maybe they don't have enough activities going for them. Whatever it is, they'll usually come to me with one problem, and there's often like some like shame or guilt associated with it. And I also have like my drawbacks in my application. That's why I've been having to improve. But being able to hear their story and then just kind of opening up to me really helps me with opening up on my social media about the problems that I'm having. So it's kind of a give and take in that regard. And it's like a canonical example. There's no like one-off kind of interaction that really stands out in that regard. But if I had to come up with cool interaction, it would have had to have been my first in-person meeting on the train. And I've actually gone to a few people, they'll say, I saw you on the train in Toronto. I'm always taking the train. But this one person, I think his name was Ida or something, Ida. Yeah, he came up to me and just struck up some normal conversation about his life in school, about wanting to take the MCAT, about my experience with it. And we just kind of chilled on the train. It helped with the train ride going by quick. And eventually I ended up seeing him a few times actually at the library that I often go to in Toronto. And it was a nice reminder of like the people around you are kind of in the same boat. They're probably trying to achieve certain like similar things. And just knowing that medicine is a community of people that are fighting for the same things, it's really, what can I say, rewarding for me and incentivizes me to continue with doing what I'm doing. Because I will say in the past when I was in university at U of T, it was just me, my grades, and like the one other person I hung out with. And outside of that, I made the mistake of not getting involved in any community. And that probably hurt me quite a bit in terms of my, I guess, application. Not only application, but just my general well-being. Like once I got out of school and then started getting integrated back into communities through work or volunteering, my life just became exponentially better. So yeah, in general, just the usual conversation of pre-meds coming up to me with their problems and us talking to each other about both our problems and working through it has been definitely life-changing for me.
That's really cool that you get recognized on the train. And I was wondering, what tips or advice would you offer to others, perhaps our listeners, who are applying to med school in Canada or who want to grow a platform on TikTok?
Okay, if you're applying to medicine, or if you're thinking of applying to medicine, really start orienting your life in a way that matches your intention. So if that means in grade 10 you want to become a doctor, start doing what you can. Like maybe get into volunteering, maybe try and find mentorship if possible. Those things can really help. And then for the people that actually aren't sure of going into medicine until later on in their life, not maybe like a few years later, maybe much later, if you do start feeling the need to get into medicine, again, try and find yourself a community right away. Like the sooner you can get into a community, the more support you have, and just the more enjoyable your life will be. I'd say that's it. I feel like my memory shot a little bit after. What was the question? Can you remind me again one more time?
Yeah, no worries. Can you give any tips for people who might want to grow a platform on TikTok? Because you do both.
Yeah, and growing a platform on TikTok. Okay, in my experience, just providing value for people is the best way. When I started, when I was making music, maybe it wasn't the most valuable for people, like immediately. Like some people enjoyed the music, but it definitely wasn't as tangible as some career-related goals. So for people wanting to get into medicine, if I'm teaching them materials for the MCAT that they're going to be taking right now, it's definitely a lot more relevant than, again, music. But if music works for you, if you're making songs that people like really love, continue with it. So just be creative, try new things. If something's kind of bothering you or stands out in your current life, maybe consider sharing it. I know it can be hard in that regard, but if you want to get around that from personal experience, just post it and then worry kind of later maybe. So that's what I learned from my music. So I'll say from my music, when I was first starting out, the songs weren't the best, but I posted it anyways. Every song I made, I'd post. And eventually people were like, oh, how do you just post a song? I'm like, what do you mean? You just post it. So you just kind of got to get over the initial discomfort that you feel of sharing your parts of your life. So yeah. There you go.
Thank you so much, Erik, for being here and sharing your story with us. It was very inspiring. As for our listeners, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Mandana, and we will see you all on our next episode. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to check out Erik's TikTok page. Bye!